you, Laura. I want to thank everybody for coming, and I really want to thank our 4 presenters for their time, their dedication, and their flexibility as we kind of worked through adjusting to this new presentation style. I believe we will start with presentations from Dan Marvin and Wynn Hjermstad, who are with the City of Lincoln. Dan Marvin has been the director of the City of Lincoln's Urban Development Department since 2019. He was an at-large member of the Lincoln City Council from 2005 to 2009 and a member of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission. He served as the Secretary and Executive Director of the West Haymart Joint Public Agency. Wynn Hjermstad is the Community Development Manager for the City of Lincoln and has been with Urban Development for 28 years, serving as manager for the last 20. She oversees the city's affordable housing efforts and the staff that helps low and moderate income people with housing rehabilitation, revitalizing older neighborhoods, and assisting homeless service providers. She's managed several large-scale redevelopment efforts, including Antelope Valley revitalization, Nebraska Innovation Campus, and redevelopment of the VA campus, and more. I believe after their presentation with some PowerPoint and interaction, we will hear from 2 other people who have a lot of interest and expertise in this topic. The first will be Shawn Ryba, who's been involved in community development work in Lincoln for 17 years and is the executive director of the South of Downtown Community Development Organization, which works to create equitable opportunities in education, job skills, workforce development, housing, and health in the neighborhoods south of the state capitol. Before that position, he was the Chief Operating Officer at NeighborWorks Lincoln for 3 of his 10 years with the organization. And then we will hear from Matt Kirkland, who is the Vice President and Realtor with Realty Works, which owns, leases, and manages residential real estate investments, as well as manages small business, commercial property investments, and homeowners associations. He's a Lincoln native who's lived here most of his life and is a member of the National Association of Realtors, the Nebraska Realtors Association, and serves on the board of directors for the Realtors Association of Lincoln. It's important to note that Shawn and Matt are alumni of Fellows Class 31 as well.
So slide 1, is just a cover page of the report that we've issued that's available online. And we went to RDG Consultants in Omaha to do the research for the report, and they were engaged probably by mid-year last year and collected a lot of data over about a 6-month period of time and issued their report, I believe in early February. And that's the report that we have online. It's a draft report. We've extended the draft period for an additional 30 days so that we can get feedback to be able to fold into the report before we finalize it. So meetings like this are helpful. If we go to the first slide or the next slide. So if we start from people like to talk about starting at 20,000 feet and then descending down. We've condensed this report down to a series of a few slides, so there's far more information that's available online through the report. But what we tried to start with is to look at Nebraska and compared to the rest of the country. And when you look at affordability, which is defined by the cost burden that people have to pay for rent utilities, Nebraska is not the most expensive state to live in, but it's getting more expensive. So the needs to do something about it are relevant and something that we need to address. But if you just look at, where we stack up to the rest of the country, Nebraska is not the most expensive. California obviously has much greater issues in terms of housing affordability than Nebraska does. So next slide. Now this will be kind of difficult to see online, so I'll try to walk through it. What we did was we took an array of cities, and we used Big Ten schools. We used our neighbor to the north, Omaha, and Springfield, Missouri was included in here because they'd been arrayed with Lincoln and other comparisons in the past. And the bars that are the gray bars, so Lincoln is the far left community. And then if you're looking across there, you have Lincoln, you have Madison, Wisconsin, Iowa City, Iowa, Champaign, and then Urbana, and then Springfield and Omaha. And the bars represent the cost burden for individuals, and the gray bars represent cost burden for renters, and then the colored bars, the aqua and the darker green, represent the cost burden. And I'm talking about the graph that's on the top of that, the cost burden for homeowners. So you can see a pretty good divergence between those people who rent and their cost burden and those people who go out and are owner occupied. And then across the bottom are just rent increase numbers for median rents for Lincoln, Madison, Iowa City, Champaign, Urbana, Springfield, and Omaha. And so when you look at those comparisons for rents across the bottom chart, you'll see that, again, we're not the most expensive. Madison would come in there, and we're within a range of other communities. So the next slide. What the next slide looks at, because part of the report is to address where we are right now, and then part of the report needs to look at where we are headed. And where we are headed from a housing perspective looks at population growth for the city of Lincoln. So population growth for the city of Lincoln in 2020 for Lancaster County is 320,000. For Lincoln, it's 288,000. By 2030, the county should grow to 360,000, and Lincoln's population would grow to 324,000. And by 2040, which is really, a little outside the horizon of what we're looking at, we'll be up to 400,000 in the county and 360,000 in the city. So the next slide, the question that this slide tries to answer is, what kinds of homes will we be building over the next 10 years? Because as the population grows, the need for housing is going to grow. And the first question that gets asked is, how are those people going to live? Are they going to live in owner-occupied buildings, or are they going to live in apartments? And the RDG's conclusion was to just estimate that half the people will live in apartments and half the people will live in owner-occupied homes. And the reason they came up with that was because in the recent history, that's really been the mix of what's been built in Lincoln. And if you look at the slide at the very top of the owner-occupied, there are two brackets. There are people for owner-occupieds trying to buy homes between 125,000 and 200,000, and those trying to buy homes for under $125,000. Obviously, buying a home in Lincoln for under $125,000 is a challenge, and building a home under $125,000 is a real challenge. But there are opportunities within Lincoln to find affordable homes, because the current median home price is $199,000, which would be under that 200,000 threshold for housing affordability for owner occupied. And then on the rental side, the rents at $500 a month or rents between $500 and $1,000 a month are those two different categories. And once again, it's difficult to find or build an apartment that would have a rent of $500, but there are some new construction apartments that are built at under $1,000. So the challenge is going to be at the very low end, how do you put together projects to be able to build at that very low end of the market, because there will be a need as we go out over the next 10 years for those kinds of homes. And Wynn will touch on this on some of our strategies. The next slide, I think, is just good data. I think when we've talked about hot spots within the city of Lincoln, the yellow area would be the area that receives the largest number of housing issues, where we have reports and problems. So what we see when we're talking about rental issues and codes violations and problems, it's really in the core of the city, certainly around the perimeter. There are apartments around Lincoln, but that's not the area where the cases have been reported presently. So older neighborhoods also have more affordable housing as well. These are where the reports are occurring, are also occurring in areas where our most affordable housing exists. So we need to come up again with strategies to address that as well. If we go on to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Wynn to go through some of the strategies.
All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you, Wynn.
Okay, great, thanks. I don't know why Zoom isn't working for me today. This is the first meeting where I haven't been able to get either the camera or the audio, so I phoned in, but we'll just make do. I'm waving to everybody in greeting right now, although you can't see me. So the plan, we have some takeaways, and I'm going to just skip through these really quick just in the interest of time, but what I would suggest to you, if you've had a chance to look at the plan and read it all, great. If you haven't, what I would suggest, it is long, as Dan mentioned, there's 4 chapters. What I would suggest you do is read the introduction, of course, and then the first 3 chapters, there's takeaways, which are summarized here, essentially an executive summary, and read those. And then chapter 4 is where we really get into the strategies. So reiterating what Dan said, that Lincoln, that our market is still relatively affordable for most households, but we see that there are a number of census tracts and neighborhoods where cost burden is really a significant issue. And cost burden generally means that you're paying more than 30% of your income for housing, including rent and utilities. And if you're at 50% or more, then you're cost overburdened. We have the greatest shortage of units for households making less than $25,000. And then, as Dan had said, over the next decade, we'll need an additional 17,000 units. That's overall to support projected population growth. Can you go to the next slide, please? I think a key here is that we'll need nearly 5,000 rental units affordable to low-income households in the next 10 years. Although we've seen consistent construction activity, we know that we can't build our way out of this, that it's not realistic to assume that we're going to be able to build 5,000 affordable housing units in 10 years. So we'll need to look at other strategies, principally looking at existing affordable housing and how we can preserve that. One of the challenges is we can offer rehab programs, we can do things to target where we see the most code violations. The challenge then is once those properties are fixed up, how do you continue to keep the rent affordable and not have the rent go up? So I think one of our big takeaways is that there's no silver bullet here. I mean, if this were easy, it would have been done by now, and there would not be a housing affordability issue in this country. So it's really going to take a number of partners coming together, working to address the various housing needs that we see here. And I think one of the key things for Lincoln in taking this project on is recognizing that although we aren't where a lot of cities are, you know, the poster children are San Francisco and Denver, where there is no affordable housing. It's just too late. Well, we don't want to get there. So trying to work with partners to be proactive to keep that from happening here is really one of our principal goals. Next slide, please. So the strategies all focus around these key elements that we know we need to build housing partnerships for sharing risk, that we need to create some mechanisms where we can bring together a large number of people, not just, there's nonprofits that have been doing an awesome job for decades in doing affordable housing, but we need more than that. And so recognizing that we need to bring in the private sector, the philanthropics, just a larger group, expand the tent so that we get more people working on this. And I think one of the good things that we were discovering, we did 24 listening sessions as we were preparing this, basically focus groups, and we were really seeing a recognition by all sectors of the city that this is an issue, that it's not just low-income people that are having, that recognize the significance of the lack of affordable housing, but it's a larger sector. And so we think that's very positive as we move forward to create partnerships. Increasing mobility in the market, we've really come to recognize that affordable housing, you can't just look at low-income housing. That housing really is a system, and you need to look at all levels of housing to see what strategies we can implement that opens up the market so that empty nesters, for example, what we heard was that they would move out of their affordable owner-occupied homes if there were more choices of places for them to go. So that's one example of if there was more housing choices, people might move out of their homes, freeing up more affordable housing for the lower end of the economic scale. We know that we need to look at policies and codes within the city. The city, as I said, we can't do this alone. This is not just city, capital C, City of Lincoln, that we do need others to be involved. But one of the things that we can do is look at our policies and codes to make sure that they are supporting affordable housing. Examples include lot sizes, for example, or setbacks or parking requirements. Not the sexiest things to talk about, but if we were to relax some of those standards, we could perhaps build more affordable housing. So I think our time is probably up. So, and well, I believe that's fine. So we'll turn it back to you.
I just want to take a moment for those that are watching or listening. If you want to get the report, you log into the city's webpage at lincoln.ne.gov. There's a box that says search by keyword, and if you type in affordable, that will take you to the page, and you'll be able to look at the report, provide feedback, and do other fun things to do.
Thank you, Dan. And I would also lastly mention, we had planned to do public meetings in March, which obviously we had to cancel due to the virus, but we had done a presentation at a City Council pre-council meeting, and that was recorded, and that's also on the website. So if you're not a fan of reading and you would rather just see a presentation, an expanded version of what we did today is also available at that website location.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan and Wynn. I will stop the share, and I think, Shawn, you're up next. So can you unmute and jump in?
Hi, everyone. I want to give a quick overview quickly of the South of Downtown Community Development Organization. And first of all, I just wanted to say I'm very privileged and honored to have the opportunity to work with residents who are living in the near South and Everett neighborhoods. It's been quite a privilege and an honor. So I just wanted to say that. The boundaries of our focus area happen to be between 9th to 17th, A Street up to K Street. And that's roughly about 5,200 people who live in that area. And as you probably saw, the map that was just shown, we are the heat map of housing issues. We have $24,000 is the median income, average median income of our target area. And when we talk about cost burdened, I would say that a majority of that neighborhood is probably paying way more than 30% of their income. We also have 94% of our 94% of the population in the focus area rents. So we have a high rental population. The South of Downtown, just real briefly, we were put into place to offer an ongoing framework for all community development work. And what that means is we're focused on workforce development, affordable housing, neighborhood safety, infrastructure improvements. That's the 40% of the neighborhood that is public space that's owned by the city. So that's the streets, sidewalks, alleys, trees, lighting, all that stuff. We're also focused heavily on community engagement, building, and organizing. So we do a lot of community work. What we've been up to right now that's kind of been supporting the Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan. First of all, I want to say that we first started out with a very strong group of resident leaders to help advocate for getting this Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan even presented or the process started. So we thought that was very critical. So our organization worked very closely with some pretty amazing resident leaders. And since I've been in my role for a little over 3 years now. We have been working very tirelessly with resident leaders and various different stakeholders to come up with a redevelopment plan for the South of Downtown that outlines 10 to 12 different neighborhood priorities, many of which will be highlighting affordable housing. We are working on that right now, and hopefully we'll be getting something on paper and adopted by the Planning Commission and City Council here very soon. Some of the many other things that we're working on, I want to emphasize we do a lot of, and I think Wynn referred to this, is that it's really critical for all of us to play. We need to be partnering and collaborating, and we all play a very serious role in coming up with solutions to address this issue. So I would say, first of all, we work very closely with the South, we are the South Downtown, with Civic Nebraska and Nebraska Appleseed Center around resident leadership development, advocacy, really working to amplify resident voices in 5 neighborhoods. So we've been working very hard on interior inspections, so rental inspection program. We worked hard to get an ordinance passed just recently. It was a good effort, but we have much more to do with that. But we're very proud of the progress that was made there. We're also working very closely with non-conforming lots. Again, Wynn was talking about this. We have tiny lots. 25% of our neighborhood is made up of these tiny lots that nobody can redevelop. We think that is a strategy that we could be putting in place to add density and get real creative. We're working on that. We're also working on creating the first community land trust in the state of Nebraska, which is at 1105 E Street, which in a nutshell, it separates the land and the property. The land has a covenant that's tied to that property that's on top of it. And it keeps and preserves the affordability of that property in perpetuity for like 99 years. So it really helps to preserve affordability. And we're really thinking that's going to be an exciting strategy that we think will work very nicely in the south of downtown, but also citywide. Some other things we're working on. We're also working on we bought two problem properties, like I just said, 1105 East Street and 1120 East Street. They were two dilapidated properties that were vacant for over 12, 15 years. 1105 East Street, we are in a amazing collaboration with NeighborWorks Lincoln and the Lincoln Community Foundation. That's going to be our very first community land trust property, as I said, and it will be a single family home that will go to a first-time home buyer that is of 80% of area median income or lower. So that we're very excited about that. And the other property we're working to develop as a four-plex, a 4-unit rental property that will also be a community land trust property. And we're currently putting plans together and looking for different partnerships opportunities there. So we're very excited about that. Those are a number of the things that we are working on as an organization, and we will continue to work together with various different partners, whoever wants to work with us. We hope that our role will be to continue to implement the many strategies that we hope are adopted through this Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan. I think that's going to be our role. We also are very ambitious with the future. We have lots of ideas on where we feel as if this plan falls short in certain categories, but we are hoping that we can work more closely. We have some ambitions with more policy-related issues, such as inclusionary zoning, which I think we're going to have an opportunity to talk about in the breakout sessions. We're also wanting to get deeper dive into the rental interior inspection programming. And also we want to look at, I promise I'm almost done. We want to look at income discrimination. So when families and individuals have Section 8 vouchers, they're having a very hard time. I think there's 1 out of 4 people who have Section 8 vouchers that are unable to find housing or unable to find participating landlords. And we really need to start looking at more protections around that. So those are kind of larger policy issues and some process sorts of changes that we would have to see. But those are some of the things that we'd like to see and are very excited again to work with other organizations and the city to get a number of these things done, because as Wynn said, I'm going to reiterate, it's going to take everyone to be a part of the solution. It's going to take partnerships. It's going to take not working in existing systems, but to create new policy to push against existing systems, because right now it's not working, obviously. So I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to be quiet now, and I just appreciate the city and all their work and what they've done to put this Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan together, because this is really going to set the table. This is something that we've desperately needed for a city our size, and we think that we could really get some amazing things done. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Shawn. All right, so our next and sort of last presenter, before we start breaking out into smaller groups and have some discussion, is Matt Kirkland. Matt is a volunteer with the Hot Topics Planning Committee, and as the committee was sitting around talking about, all right, let's do an event around this issue, we kind of all turned to Matt and said, so what do you think? And so he helped us plan an event that was his own area of expertise. So Matt, thanks for your service on the committee, and why don't you unmute and join in, give us some of your perspectives.
All right. Hi, everybody. Am I unmuted?
Yep, you're all good.
Okay, great. I come to the group today, and thanks for having me, Laura, and everybody, with the kind of a variety of perspectives. My wife and I in our business, we are property owners. We actually own some units in Shawn's neighborhood that we rent out. And then we also own a property management company that manages over 750 rental units around the city. And then I'm also a realtor who kind of specializes in working with real estate investors that often want to purchase either single family homes or multifamily properties to invest in. And then I obviously just sell homes to, people that want to buy and sell homes, including a lot of first-time home buyers, where our people that have been renting turn into home buyers if that's their goal. So have a lot of experience with a lot of these topics that we talked about. One of the things that caught my eye when in the city's presentation is there was one of the slides mentioned an affordability rate of about $500 a month. And, when you put that into reality in Lincoln, if you look for a property to rent for $500 in a month, you probably can't even find a 2-bedroom. I would be hard pressed in the city of Lincoln to find a 2-bedroom, let alone a 3-bedroom or higher. You're probably looking at a 1-bedroom or a efficiency or a studio at that price point. So if you are looking for affordable housing and your budget is $500 and you have a family, we're talking bunk beds and stuff. So that was something that caught my eye. And then, we could go on and on about all the different issues. I would love some people to fire some questions, and maybe that's what for our breakout rooms sessions are for. But from a perspective as a realtor too, realtors are obviously believing in home ownership. That's our whole job to promote. We work a lot with the Home Builders Association of Lincoln, and we know that there are challenges. And I'm not a developer per se, but I have sold some new construction homes, and I've worked with some developers that have them listed. And to build that home that would be considered a starter home, I did some statistics. I did some research today. I wish I did the exact dollar figure that the city used, but just for a quick example, if you were to look to purchase a 3-bedroom home between $100,000 and $150,000, that would be considered a starter. And that's actually, if you really look closely and you get to where you're looking at that $100,000 price point, you're really almost looking at a fixer-upper type home in a lot of cases. There's only 13 currently available in the city of Lincoln. If you were in that same price point and you wanted to try to find a 4-bedroom home for your family, maybe you had 3 kids, you have one choice currently in the city of Lincoln available for sale between $100,000 and $150,000. If you bump it up to $175,000, there's 17 choices available at a 3-bedroom, and there's 2 available 4-bedrooms under $175,000 in Lincoln. So we have some issues with rental availability, and we have some issues with homes available for purchase, what you would call affordable. So
for all of my presenters, there's a question in the chat box asking about the Missing Middle Act that was in the legislature. Are any of your organizations, the city, the South of Downtown, or Matt Realty Works, following, supporting, lobbying, involved with that Missing Middle Act?
Hi, this is Wynn. I did get my video working. It was operator error. But yes, the city is following this very closely. I think in general, we think the idea is a good one. For those of you that don't know what it is, the missing middle is generally considered duplex, triplex, and fourplexes. What we've seen over the years is that there's been construction in single family, generally higher end, and apartment units, and nothing in the, not much in the middle. What this legislation would do would require all cities, and I believe they recently changed it from all cities to cities over a population of 5,000 or so, would be required to allow duplex, triplex, fourplexes in all zoning districts. Again, we think that's well-intentioned, that the idea is good. What we have concerns about is the state telling the local jurisdictions how they have to do their zoning. So there's been some ongoing conversations with Senator Hansen, who is working on that bill, to see how we can effectively create some of that housing without forcing cities and losing that local control over our zoning ordinance.
Looks like we've
Hi,
got
everyone.
some answers to Nate in the chat, but anyone else have an answer to that question?
Laura, can I make a comment?
Yes, please, absolutely.
Yeah, this is Shawn again at the south of downtown. Yeah, so our organization finds this to be a very important, critical piece of legislation, and our organization has done our best to amplify the voices of residents who would like to see these different sorts of housing solutions. So our organization did come out in support of this particular piece of legislation. We think it's critical. And if I'm not mistaken, the city of Lincoln, I think, took a neutral stance on this. And I guess for me, my concern with the city not taking a stance on this, and I understand some of the concerns, but I think really I think the motivation behind the legislature and Senator Hansen doing this is because we do lack housing tools to get the missing middle. And I would hope that it motivates and inspires us locally here in Lincoln to come up with our own strategies. It's unfortunate that it had to come from the state level. And yes, we would lose some control. However, let's not let them or have them have to do that. I think we need to be coming up with our own strategies. We need to do that like yesterday. No more excuses. So it is kind of interesting that the city would take a neutral stance on that. I'd be open to hearing from Wynn and Dan on that, on what exactly we would be losing. But I think at the end of the day, we definitely need the missing middle housing in Lincoln desperately. And this was a first step, and I hope that it leads to something else.
Dan or Wynn, you want to make a response? Matt, you have anything to get in on there?
Well, I know, talking to Home Builders Association of Lincoln, there have not been, it's difficult to find a lot where you could build a multifamily property. And so I'm sure that's what this is addressing. I know some of the, is this the bill, Shawn, where some of the neighborhood associations came out against it? Or this is a different bill?
Yes, they came out in full force against it. And
This one?
yes. And I think everybody's right and everybody's wrong on this. I think that we do have to preserve our existing neighborhoods in responsible ways. We also have to be looking at exclusionary zoning practices that are not allowing everyone to live. And it's like Matt just said, we can't find lots that will allow for this missing middle. So something's got to give. We have to maybe be looking at zoning changes, loosening up some of those strategies, because not everybody's going to be a homeowner. 46% of our city rents. Renters are a very important part of our community and our economy.
Dan, I thought I saw you speaking and maybe you might have been muted.
Yeah, I was muted. I'm probably not the expert on this. I know there's been a lot of iterations. I thought at one point there was housing action plan, and then that would be addressing some of the concerns, which is obviously what this report that we've got does. And again, as Wynn said, there was some concern, I think, from neighborhoods and obviously from the city about the state writing the local zoning ordinance for the community, and what that obviously passed in Lincoln. And that's really, you know, from my experience prior to being with urban development, that's been an issue for a lot of different neighborhoods.
All right, I saw one more question in here before we do breakout. There was a question about units that were built in the 80s and the 90s using tax increment or tax exempt financing. What happened to those units?
I think what they're referring to is low-income housing tax credits, and that's a program offered through NIFA. And the tax, there's a limit, and I'm not by any means an expert, so others please jump in here, but when tax credit projects are done, and there were many more done from the 70s and 80s than there are now for a variety of reasons. That's another whole topic, but there's a certain period of time where they have to remain affordable. And what happens in a lot of cases is after that affordability period ends, the private investors sell them off, and then we lose that affordability. In some cases, they remain affordable housing, but I think in many cases, and those of you with more experience jump in here, but a lot of them, I know recently NeighborWorks, I'm a board member on NeighborWorks, we tried to purchase one and were essentially outbid. And the idea was that we would continue to keep it affordable. So I think that the short answer is the affordability period ends, the investors want their money back, and so they end up selling them, and then we lose that affordable housing.
But in obviously, some of the operators are the Lincoln Housing Authority, and they extend that period for, you know, much longer. So it really kind of depends on who did the project and what their mission is.
This is Fred Hoppy. It's been quite a while that NIFA's required a 30-year compliance period instead of just 15. So there aren't a ton of projects that are out there that have been developed in the last 15 years that are available for sale. They're still under the affordable compliance period, most of them.
All right, well, thanks. I appreciate it, everybody. So let's do push out to those breakout rooms, Lily. And we are going to figure this out as we go along. Thanks for bearing with us. I think what Lily has done is named the rooms. So you should know what topic your room is focused on once you get there. So I did drop in on you guys, and I hope everyone came up with at least one volunteer who might be able to talk a little bit about what the discussion was in their breakout room around their topic. Or if you didn't get to the topic, and certainly right before we went to breakout rooms, I was seeing more activity in the chat around that missing middle. That really seemed to have been an issue that people wanted to talk about. If you talked about that in your breakout room, that's okay. But we'd like to hear a little bit from each breakout room. So I'm going to call you out, or at least call out the topic, and hopefully whoever was going to be the volunteer speaker for that room can unmute and give us a quick 1 to 2 minute summary of what it was that you guys covered. So we're going to start with building strategic partnerships. Go ahead and unmute and just jump in. Oh, thanks, Carl.
Yep, this is Carl. And thanks everybody for your participation in this really important topic. So right now the report indicated that NeighborWorks and Habitat for Humanity are kind of the two main groups working in this area. But there are also a lot of others that are involved too. And so recognizing those partners that we currently have is really important. And then looking at other things. And Shawn mentioned one of those possibilities, and that's the issue of inclusionary housing and looking at making sure that we're also providing affordable units as we also do student housing and luxury condominiums and whatever other kind of housing we're providing in the city, making certain that the affordable piece is provided for in some way. And the financing of it. There also was one I thought really interesting idea, and that was sort of tied to the economy now and coming out of the this difficult time we're having. Somehow a government program, believe it or not, that would put people to work, carpenters, builders, people that would be involved in rehabilitating some of the existing housing stock that we have. I thought that was a great idea.
Awesome. Anything else from Building Strategic Partnerships?
I think that's it.
Thank you. All right. How about creating mechanism to share risk?
This is Brian Zeck. Good afternoon, everyone. So we solved all the problems around mitigating risk, which is that Lee Heffelbauer remortgages her house a few times, and then she can be the lender of choice going forward. That was suggested by Chris Lamberty, who's hiding behind a wall of black screens. So thank you, Chris, for the suggestion. What we talked about was, as people talked about earlier, that there just aren't a ton of lots to develop. So what does that look like? One of the suggestions in the report, and if you're looking at the report, it's page 77, that discusses the risk mitigation. One of them is property tax abatement, which probably wouldn't be super wise right now, knowing that we're about to have a hell of a lot less tax collection of all types. So that might get people up in arms if we did property tax abatement for builders this year. We also talked about potentially using TIF. The Housing Trust Fund has been something that's been discussed in philanthropic circles for the last 3 or 4 years. So that would be interesting to see if it gets some more traction. And then there were a couple of best practices that were cited in Des Moines, Omaha, and Minneapolis around lending consortiums, which could be interesting to think about how to take smaller pots of money and put it together to be able to do something. Also, banks are required by Congress to do a certain amount of charitable. That could also be pooled also, which I know Shawn and his team have discussed. So we didn't have any silver bullets. What we did talk about is what can work now in this current environment and what maybe we would wait on.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And thanks, Lee. How about preserving existing affordable housing units? Someone from that breakout room.
Well, unlike Brian's group, we did not solve all the problems.
That doesn't surprise me.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, enforcement comes first. Code enforcement, we're not doing it, and certainly in the areas that are high rental that was yellow on the maps in North Everett and near South, those areas are not getting reported because it's 94% rental. And so maybe a more intensive block by block where the biggest problems are to go in and inspect, have a block by block inspection along with, and you don't just go in with a heavy hand to inspect, but there needs to be some mental health with that, and take in HHS and the health department. So you're looking at the whole picture holistically and dealing with it. And there obviously needs to be some incentives. So whether that's what Brian just mentioned, we could borrow from Lee's mortgage, I guess, to start a funding and to help incentivize landlords to do the right thing. How do you get them then to not raise the rent? That's a quandary. And how do you, because you could always have that written in the loan, but I think for somebody to follow up with it to make sure the rents aren't raised, that's another issue. Didn't figure that one out. And we talked about freezing property taxes when houses are rehabbed in certain areas, for freezing property taxes for a period of time. And also working with LES, as Chelsea brought up, a lot of people have in 100-year-old buildings have problems with leaky windows and high utility bills. Landlords have no incentive to make improvements because they're not paying the utility bills. How do you incentivize that? I think we can work more with LES to make their program a little more user-friendly and not put as so much, although I don't have a problem with the program they have that pays people's shut-off notices. But to pay the same shut-off notice in the same building year after year, a couple times a year, just seems a little insane. Let's fix the building so those utilities aren't so high. That's about it. Unless anyone has something else to add.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
Pat struck a real sensitive nerve with me. I think a couple thoughts that I just wanted to share real quick since I have an opportunity. The code enforcement piece is really one of the takeaways from the Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan for me was how we define public safety. As a city, we prioritize police and fire, and nobody asks questions. And for me, it's super low priority code enforcement. We're not defining, it's not an inclusive definition of public safety. Where people live should be the very basic of safety. That's where our basic safety concerns should lie. These are where people are living and raising families. So our definition of public safety and not allowing this to be a top priority in city budgets is it's counterproductive, and it's actually quite debilitating for many people. It also, again, is structured as a right now it's kind of like a self-policing. We're going to just kind of do our thing with, keeping things up to code, and we're going to rely heavily on tenants to make complaints, when in fact most tenants don't have very many options for housing, don't know their rights as tenants, and have a fear of retaliation, of losing their housing. So it's very complicated, and it doesn't help support tenants. And I think code enforcement needs a complete overhaul. And it needs to be not only focused on supporting landlords, but also helping to support tenants and continue to be housed, making sure they know their rights, and having somebody that will help support navigating the system and to other housing opportunities. So sorry for going on that spiel, but I think we have a real broken system with our code enforcement right now. And first and foremost, it's defining what public safety is, it's in there, and also making it a priority. The capacity that we have with a city our size is completely understaffed, underfunded, and a low priority. And that's a real problem.
Can I speak on this a little bit?
Yeah, hold on just one sec before you continue. It is straight up 1 o'clock, and normally we adjourn these things pretty firmly at 1. But so I've seen the participant count going down, so I know some people are logging off. However, if you are available and obviously want to continue the conversation, we are certainly going to keep going. We still have 4 different breakout rooms that I would like to hear from, but I'm not going to, obviously this is a topic that we're engaged on, so I'm going to let that go. But if you need to excuse yourself, please feel free to do so. But the rest of us can keep talking. Matt, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, I just a little bit on the inspection process. The city of Lincoln, I'm not exactly sure how many inspectors they have, but it's only probably 4 or 5. Yeah, 4. Thank you, Shawn. So any multi-family property, 3 units and up, should be getting inspected annually, but that inspection is only the common areas of the property and then the exterior. On a sale of a multifamily property, 3 units and up, the property has to go through what's called a certificate of compliance, where the city inspectors come out and also the fire department come out, and they inspect the property and go into each unit, and then they give a list of deficiencies that need to be corrected on that property. Once the city's in there for their city certificate of compliance inspection, those repairs must be completed whether the sale takes place or not. So if for example, if a buyer were to not be happy with the results of the inspection and decide to walk from the sale, the owner of the property still is responsible to go in and fix the deficiencies and get the property up to code. Now, where we have a lot of, and I think so there's some regulation there, but where we don't have, there's no current inspections for a single family home or even a duplex for that matter, rental property, unless I think there's a complaint to the city, and then that property would get addressed as a rental that has an issue. But there's not anything automatic on a single family or a duplex. It's only 3 units and up.
Casey, you wanted to jump in and expand something back what Pat was talking about with LES and utilities?
Yeah, I was in the same breakout, this preserving one, and we talked about LES, and I just wanted to expand on what Pat had said in our summary, that LES does have a program for homeowners for rehab to make your building more energy efficient. We weren't sure if that program is available to people who own rental properties, but that is something that we would love to see expanded or included in the plan, that people who own rental buildings should be able to access that money so that tenants eventually pay lower utility bills. Right now, there's not a lot of incentive, since tenants pay the utility bills themselves, for the landlords to make those energy efficiency adjustments.
All right, let's keep going forward if we can. Can we hear from the expanding the number of affordable units group? And if your speaker has left, I would understand.
Let's see, I think that was us. I'm Josh Shawn with Habitat for Humanity. We talked about a couple of options in the report or in the study. There was an example from Grand Island about redeveloping kind of some micro blight units. It had me reminded of an opportunity that Habitat for Humanity in Grand Island had pursued in working with the city of Grand Island to actually make changes to their zoning requirements. That gave them the opportunity to purchase land or lots at smaller sizes that they were able to put into a larger development that they're going to develop and sell habitat houses onto multiple families. So it was a good opportunity for them. I think that would be a great opportunity for Lincoln to pursue as well, to again, take a look at those zoning requirements to where developers, whether it's nonprofit or those partnerships between nonprofit and for-profit or affordable, non-affordable entities come together and develop those units. Inclusionary zoning was another thing that it was talked about. But then also just kind of that underlying problem that we're facing as property developers, which is the affordability of land. We look around the city of Lincoln, there's lots available. Most of the lots available for development that aren't infill or have zoning restrictions to them are located in developments that are selling lots individually for $65,000, $70,000+ each, which does not make for an affordable unit. So, somebody needs to be able to help cover that gap or that cost. And a lot of times that work and that effort is placed on nonprofits to find those funders, where somebody, it never fails. If there is a board member or a donor or a board member or volunteer that says, well, just get somebody to donate their land. And Well, there's a reason land is being sold for $60,000+ per unit. So nobody, or at least not very many, are donating land for housing units right now. So, we're grateful as nonprofits for, funders who do step forward and help support that. But there's only so many resources, and the more we can work together as organizations, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, to develop affordable units, the better. Our collaboration is much stronger than working alone.
Great, thank you. How about increasing mobility? Someone from that room? All right, we're going to keep going then.
Oh. So
Sorry, Nate, go.
is my internet lagging? I'm sorry. And I just realized my video was kind of broken, so I'm back. A lot of our discussion kind of was already talked about in this large group. Everything kind of all mellows together. We did discuss the CARES Act a little bit, and I think one of the big discussions we had was the CARES Act is the rent to own good, but then you have to deal with the issue of credit scores once you actually are in the program. I think my video has stopped.
All right, we're going to keep going. How about expanding neighborhood also thank you, Nate, for sorry, didn't mean to just move right on, but thank you for reporting out. Expanding neighborhood reinvestment. Someone from that group?
Yeah, so I got to talk with folks in that group, and Dawn had provided some good history and background of the situation in the 70s regarding slip-ins in the south of downtown, and he described some of the conflict that sparked, and that we all agreed in the room, Chris Lamberty, Dawn, everyone, that kind of conflict is necessary to avoid with moving forward, because it's not productive and it just creates a pendulum shift. But it also that also highlights the unique and specific situations that are specific to different neighborhoods. And we definitely referred to south of downtown several times, but I know that it relates to other neighborhoods, especially historic neighborhoods too. And so I had mentioned, I'm with Collective Impact Lincoln via Nebraska Appleseed as well. And one thing that we support in response to this coordinated action plan is a feasibility study to actually find those numbers, to really know what will actually work, because we believe that it will work for these variety of neighborhoods and the variety of situations that these neighborhoods are in, for expanding and changing zoning regulation to make so that it is a unified effort of creating more affordable, adequate housing that preserves and stays true to the neighborhood character that I think that was discussed in the plan in this section. But that, again, I think all of us agreed on that in the breakout as well, that there's many moving parts and there's many organizations and people with a stake in this, and no single one is going to get everything that they want. And so it's important to prioritize affordable and adequate housing in that, and that it is a matter of collaboration, of listening and communication, and being careful not to make a pendulum swing of power one way or another that takes decades to recover from again.
Great, thank you, Vic, I appreciate it. All right, last breakout group for you folks who stuck with me. Thanks so much. Insurance, pardon me, last breakout group topic was ensure policies and code support to support affordable housing, which I do think we dropped in on a little bit earlier, but did that room have anything new to add? All right. All right. I'm going to take a quick scan at the chat room. I don't know that I've seen anything too new. To Shawn and Matt and Wynn and Dan, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Any final thoughts before we close the meeting?
Yeah, I do, Laura. If I know, once my video, I got that worked out. When I'm looking at it, it's got my email address on it. And I don't know if everybody can see that. I'm seeing nods, so make a note. And if you have, this has really been a great conversation, and it's really helpful for us to hear from such a diverse group the comments that you have, and we certainly want to encourage more comments. So if you make a note of my email, you can not only go to lincoln.ne.gov affordable and do feedback there, but you can also email me directly. And I guess that the last thing I'd say is about the plan is, this isn't a one-off. This isn't, we get it done, we go through council, we're done. That it's fluid, it's going to keep evolving as time goes by. It's a great starting point. I think there's some great things in it, but I think as we really get into this, it will evolve and grow from what's already there. So I really appreciate hearing all your comments on it today. And please email me.
Great,
well,
thank you.
And my comment is we've talked about how we were going to do live meetings, and I think this has been as effective as we could have hoped for in terms of getting people in a virtual room and then getting some feedback. And I've taken a lot of notes here, and I really appreciate all the work that people have done.
Shawn or Matt, any final words?
To unmute myself. Just thanks to Leadership Lincoln for the opportunity to talk to everybody. If anyone ever has any questions for me, I'm always available. Search me up, Matt Kirkland, Realtor in Lincoln. Happy to help. Answer any questions anytime.
Dan, fine to meet you.
Great to be here. It was great. It was really neat.
And thanks, Lee, for solving the problem. We'll be sure to forward your name to everybody in the city too, that you stepped forward.
Thank you, Lee.
All right, well, thanks again. We really appreciate you guys joining in with us. We enjoy these opportunities to engage on hot topics in our community, and we appreciate that you guys joined us in this new virtual platform, and we wish you all the best. Be well. Hope your families are well.